This program was made possible from the support of VSA Texas and Amerigroup.
I'm Gene.
And I'm Dave.
And we're the
Gene and Dave Show.
Dave, this is our lucky day. Today we have with us the famous photographer, documentarian, Tom Olin.
Welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for being here. Man, I can't believe I'm sitting by the guy that I've been looking at pictures on calendars and websites, and any movie I ever see that has to do with disability rights or disability anything, there's at least one, if not 100 pictures from Tom Olin on that video. So welcome. We're really glad that you're here.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
I met Tom almost 30 years ago while we were doing a protest, and Tom was taking photos, and we got a chance to talk a little bit. Not much, because I had to do my part and he had to do his, but we struck up a conversation, and here it is. Almost 30 years later, and as you say, Dave, his pictures are everywhere.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny, as we were sitting down here in the studio, Tom had a little deja vu moment and started telling us about how he got started. So let's hear that story. How did you get started on taking pictures?
Well, it went through. It was kind of funny because I never picked up a camera when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
You know, like a lot of. You would think that I would have been, a little more interested in photography, but it wasn't until I came back from Brazil with a kind of a almost a vision of what I should do for the rest of my life, and that was to be involved with disability. Prior to going to Brazil, I worked as an orderly in a rehab hospital, and that's where I'd met Diane Coleman, who started Not Dead Yet and was one of our leading attorneys. And had worked with Steve Gold at times, and the Baby Doe cases, the different little cases around that was a part of our history, and that was in Los Angeles, where I had just come down from Berkeley, realized that there wasn't very much happening in Berkeley, because I said, okay, where would you go if you came back from Brazil and said, I am going to do something in the world of disability and disability rights? Well, there was only one place I could think of, and that was Berkeley. And so I went right to Berkeley and found out that the movement had gone away, or it wasn't there anymore. Not the type of movement that actually is pounding the streets and rolling the streets and whatever. And
so you went to the party just to find out that the party was over?
Yes, but I did learn how to take pictures at that point.
Okay.
I said, oh, let me get some media while I'm staying here. And so I did pick up the camera at that point, and then moved down to L.A., where they had just started a new state chapter of the state disability. I know I was trying to remember this name, and it was anyhow, it was
Roland?
It was a state organization.
Oh, the organization.
That was largest in the U.S. Statewide, and we just started a new chapter down in L.A., which included Paul Longmore, which included Ann Finger, writer Ann Finger. Of course, Paul Longmore was another historian and a writer, and There were just Diane involved, Carol Gill, which I call the mother of disability culture. She was there. I mean, there were just a lot of great people. Barbara Waxman, one of the earliest feminists in our fight for the ADA and fight for rights around that time. So we started a chapter, a local chapter, and I started to take pictures of for our local newsletter, and that's how it kind of started.
But you take more than pictures, Tom. When you take a picture, you tell a story. Let's look at this first picture. This is some folks marching with a flag, and this is a great shot. I love this. You see a crowd of people, you see the flag, so you know the flag to me always says something, you know, patriotic. It's something about this country, and of course, protesting is one of the rights that we enjoy in this country, and there's quite a few people in this picture.
Yes.
So it's no small.
While we're trying to get that picture up, we do have actually the flag itself has a interesting story. It was actually done on a kitchen table, and we didn't know what it was going to look like. We had gone out, Mike Allberger, who was working with Wade Blank in Denver at you know, doing ADAPT, and I lived in Denver a few years after that, but during this time we were passing through, Diane Coleman and I, and we said, okay, we're going to Philadelphia. You know, we need a flag. You know, you know, that's the birthplace, and we'll make our own flag. And so we got this American flag, and we took the stars off. You know, and said, well, what are we going to do with the stars? Well, let's first just make the stick of, you know, of
the symbol of accessibility. Yeah.
Right, the access symbol, and it kind of looked pretty good.
Which is just the stick figure there?
Yeah. Well, the stars made the, you know.
Oh, and then you decided to use the stars?
Yeah, we used the stars, and that flag, actually, the flag that you see there was buried with Wade Blank. There too, but it was so funny. We're all like putting stars in, and Babs Johnson was also there, and Diane and myself, and all of a sudden I jump up and say, "Where's my camera? This is Betty Ross. This is like, I've got to get my camera and take some pictures of this." And so that was interesting time with the flag. The march itself was, we had just done a demonstration at the White House, and in this picture, there's our Senator Harkin, Tom Harkin. Thank you. In fact, I was just showing this to Tom. Tom and I were, Senator Harkin and I were at a museum in Chicago that had an exhibit of mine, and it was the first time he had seen this picture. And there you have Ralph Needs from American Way. You have oops, but
it's all right.
You had I. King Jordan in that picture. You have Evan Kemp Jr. back here. There was the head of the ELC Commission under George Bush. I mean, it's an interesting picture if you can see all the friends. There's a kid, which he was. I don't even know if he was a teenager. He was probably just becoming a teenager at that point. Ryan Duncanwood, who now is he's a secretary for the organization of Self Advocates. You know, he grew up be a really great advocate. And there's
So quite a story associated with this picture.
yeah, well,
And quite a crowd.
on the way to the Capitol, and this is This is the same day also where we had the rally at the Capitol, and then right after the rally, someone said, "We're going to go to the steps of the behind where we were at, and we are going up."
Well, I'll
Up the
tell you what.
steps.
Before we go up the
Yeah.
steps, let's take another look at another group of people.
I was talking about all the people that are in this picture. I see some of our own Austin favorites and Adapt favorites of Stephanie Thompson right there, and
Yeah.
kind of leading the pack as she always does, right?
Right up front there. Yeah.
Right, and you were talking about, well, actually, you were talking about Jennifer, the girl with
CP.
CP, and that's actually my mother pushing
Oh,
her.
really?
Wow. Wow.
And you have another Texan that was Frank Lozano.
Yeah, from El Paso.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Now here's another picture. I like this because it shows a crowd. I mean, it's a lot of
Yes.
people. Sometimes on the news they'll focus in on just 3 or 4 people, but yeah, there's quite a crowd there.
Yes. One
Showing
of the
it's-
things that I really wanted to do back then was to show how big and powerful we were. This was outside the City Hall in San Francisco,
Mm.
and it was a sight that they don't get to see all the time, even during the time of when Berkeley was doing its thing. It was at the right time. With our movement, we have to show up over and over again, because
Yeah.
not only are the elected officials different, at times, but we have to give power to ourselves too. So we have to show
Right.
that power and give that power, so we can move on. And we're still, even though these demonstrations turned into the legislation of the ADA, we still have to fight for that every day. I mean, right?
Absolutely.
Even right now, there's a fight in the House and the Senate to lower the expectations of the ADA, and making sure that the business people have not only 1 year, but maybe a couple of years, even have a plan.
Wow.
So it is, it's something that we have to always be constant about.
Yeah, I like this picture, Tom, because well, it's an outside photo, and it shows some people out in the cold, and it shows we're pretty serious about this stuff. I mean, nothing's going to stop us. Cold weather, wind, rain, whatever, they're out there.
But also from an artistic point of view, you got this line running right up through the middle, where you've got one side on one and another side on the other. Just it's poetic, as Gene was saying. Your pictures speak 1,000 words. It's some incredible art.
The artist eye, absolutely.
That was in Montreal. It was actually one of the few times that we went outside the country to make our voices heard. And what was interesting is the local disability groups were scared to come and work with us, because they're so tethered to the government that they were scared that if they came and fought with us, that they would lose their benefits.
They would lose what they did have.
Yeah.
Even worse is the police were so scared of us.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
right after.
I
This
didn't-
is not too far, in time after the French resurrection up there, and they hadn't had anything like this since. They actually rented a helicopter, and And they were so scared that I actually went into we're right in front of the Queen Elizabeth Hotel, and when it's always fun to see them march because they a good police department needs that kind of involvement of their status of order,
authority,
and so you have. I was following them, and I had at that time a KPFA, which is a radio station out in California, public radio station. Radio. I had the press documents and using a camera. And they didn't. When they checked me as I was following them into the Queen Elizabeth Hotel, they just looked at it and said, okay, they didn't realize that it was radio and what am I doing with it?
Right.
But they were all the policemen were carrying this satchel, and that's one of the reasons I was kind of going, because it kind of looked like God, you could put a gun in it, and a rifle, and so they went into this room, and sure enough, not only was it a rifle, they were all machine guns.
Oh, geez.
That's how scared they were
Wow.
of us. They had heard that that the people that all these people, most of these people with disabilities are people that are on SSI. That a lot of them have come from institutions and are pretty disabled. From quads to paras and whatever, but they had been told they were Vietnam vets.
Okay.
And not only are you might be scared of Vietnam vets, but on their wheelchairs they would say, "Do you remember Ben-Hur and all in the wheels that had the
Spikes.
and stuff like that?" That's what they were doing. You had to deal with.
Oh, wow.
So they were ready with machine guns.
Here's another one showing a confrontation between the police and the protesters. And although we subscribe to nonviolent direct action, sometimes it can still get pretty heated. People are going to stand their grounds on both sides. But again, the people in cold weather, and as uncomfortable as it can be, they've got to show they're here for a reason. And they're not going to let anything stop them.
Right, and this group right here, which is made up of a lot of people from ADAPT, back then it was American Disabled for Accessible Public Transit, and that was a major issue, up until the ADA was passed. We just took that group said, okay, let's just take one issue and go after it, and to their, they understood that, and it was easy for the public to understand that one issue. It was just like we could all understand, during the Black Civil Rights Movement, that Rosa Parks couldn't get up to the front of the bus.
Right.
And of course, we couldn't even get on the bus. So it was the easy one to,
Yeah, I noticed Bob Kopka right here in the center of this picture. Another Austin favorite who's been on the Gene and Dave show.
Right, yeah. Let's check out another one here. I just had to put this one in because he's people out braving the cold, and you see blankets here, and it shows the power of just a couple people in a wheelchair to stop an entire bus. And of course, when you stop the one bus, the traffic behind it is stopped, and you get a lot of attention.
It was a very, very cold day. That was outside the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. The good thing is that if you do capture a city bus, you will be arrested by the city people, and they have jails. So these people had been out all night long, cold.
my
And
God.
so they were just looking to be arrested to get warmed up
Oh.
in jail.
And yeah, they're looking on for lifts, and also I see they're on steps. So
Yeah.
and there's a sign that says "Show me a lift," but it probably talking about a lift for a bus. But ramps are also important to get into buildings, and
Yeah, it was also a way to, if we close this down, the people that used it had to, kind of be, they had to find another place, another way, something that
Yeah.
we all
So these are stairs going into a bus terminal or something? or-
This was actually a hotel that
Okay.
was having a meeting from the bus companies.
Oh, okay.
wow,
And
excellent.
so show me a lift, because back then they would tell the press that the lift was so expensive that they could not put it on, and you could show them, except that these buses last for 20 years, and
Right,
you
right.
divide that into those 20 years, that lift isn't really very much compared to anything else that bus has.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And here, this is my favorite picture you took, Tom. This is in the rotunda.
I know why, because Gene's in here.
What? I mean, what? Oh, there.
Isn't this the back of your neck
Well,
with no ponytail?
Well, right you are, Dave. There I am in the lower right corner with my back to the camera. I've got the white backpack on the chair, and I'm
He's still wearing a hat, though. He's always wearing a hat.
my touring cap there. But yeah, this was shortly before they voted on the ADA, and we heard there was an attempt to weaken the ADA, so we all got into the rotunda to show how serious we were about it. And shortly after this picture was taken, they started arresting
They
people.
started to arrest you, and what the thing is that they were the shouting and the protesting could be heard all throughout that Capitol, and we had congressmen come down and kind of look stern, but they'd come down. Still, those that were for us would say, keep it up. Everyone could hear you, and it was really important. The pictures that you just saw from the march in the Capitol and things like that. In this, during this day, this is 3 months before the signing. And it was needed, it was a grassroots, that came in,
There's people from all over the country, as you say, grassroots,
Yes.
Not only in wheelchairs, but people who are deaf, blind, all sorts of disabilities.
Yeah, we had delegate students come and support us. And one of the things that they tried to do is to separate some of the disabilities, some of the epilepsy. They wanted to say, it's a little different because you can take pills for that. And they said, well, and I don't think we should have amputees because they have actually, plastic feet that they can put on.
Yeah.
And they definitely didn't want to put in HIV at all. They wanted to separate that, but we said no to every one of them. There was just like no compromise. We're together, and we're going to stay together, and that was one of the biggest, I think, accomplishments that I'm really proud of, that the disability community stayed together and did. I mean, we're not just a subgroup of a subgroup of a subgroup. We are America, and a big part of it.
Absolutely. Now here's a photo of a march. We're trying to, except for the front four, going single file, and the reason for that, of course, is to get more attention. People can see the long line of people that are involved, and get an idea of the significance for us.
This is in Atlanta, Georgia, and at times it would be 5 blocks or even more, of single lines that would traverse, throughout the city. It was really good to hit not just D.C. D.C. is, everyone hits D.C.
Right,
protest, and nonviolence, and this time we actually, did it in places. This was in Georgia. What better place to, Martin Luther King.
Oh, yeah.
So there was just it was good to do that. We actually hit Morehouse, where he went to college, and took over the administration.
Wow.
So you must have really got your exercise when you were following around all these marches. I noticed
yes,
there's pictures from like every angle of you getting way far in advance of them. And
Yes, I wish I could do that
those long
nowadays
street
a little
pictures.
more. But
Now guess where this picture was
So
taken?
this must really be old. They're wearing colonial clothes.
Yeah. It's,
Is this a time travel picture?
it's either that or I'm guessing maybe Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Maybe, yeah.
This was actually, there was a court case, Adapt versus Burnley, and we had Tim Cook, who was a lawyer back then, and it was a federal court, and it was one of the big cases on transportation back then, and I think that was just before we took over the Liberty Bell.
Oh, here's another one with the flag with the wheelchair symbol in, and showing the power of what just a few people can do. Here's a photo. Is that Bob?
There's Bob
Bob
Hand.
Kafka, yeah.
And that, it's kind of it's one that I kind of like, not only because it captures something that is very thought-provoking, but it is one of my first ones too. It was the first time I had been with ADAPT.
Oh,
And,
okay. Okay.
And this is inside the police van, and
Wow.
just happened to stick my camera in and got a good shot.
It's so powerful, I think, that one picture. I mean, as if the wheelchair isn't captivating enough. I mean, holding you captive to some extent, but you got to have handcuffs on. And,
Right.
Right.
And it became one of my favorite pictures only after years of people really telling me their stories of why they thought it was their favorite picture.
Oh. Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, when I'm taking a photo and I'm in an action, I'm in a world that it's hard to talk to me because I'm in this another world, and
I tried to talk to you, and you said, no, not now, I'm working.
yeah, that was always a problem too. Everyone kind of knew me and wanted to say hi,
Yeah.
and then if that happened a lot, then the police would say, "Oh,
You're
he's
You
not."
know these people.
Yeah, and
You're
so
one
they
of
would
them.
separate
one of
me
them.
out. Yeah, I wouldn't get good shots sometimes because of that.
Now here's a great shot. You've got the flag. Well, you've got the folks with disabilities, and you've got the flag with the disability symbol on, and then you've got the Capitol building in the background.
Next to the American flag.
Good
As
call,
well,
Dave.
yeah.
Good call. Yeah.
This is
Very well framed.
this is the day of the that we had the signing.
The signing of the ADA.
And that's Barbara Nolan. And Barbara Nolan wrote this really neat book back in the 70s and 80s called How to Kick Ass and Get What You Want from VR.
Wow. Wow. I should have read that book.
It's still pretty good, I hear. It's still.
Oh, now this is a super shot here.
Yeah.
The Liberty Bell That's Diane from Philadelphia, is that right?
Diane, that's Diane Coleman.
Diane Coleman,
Not
okay.
dead yet fame, and we had just been in Denver. That's where we made the flag, and we were taking it to Philadelphia for the court case. And this is when we took over the Liberty Bell, and it was just, what a neat thing to do when, as a movement,
Yeah,
Yep.
symbol of liberty.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful shot. All right, now here's another. Of course, all your pictures are my favorite, Tom. But okay, we have Stephanie Thomas in front, the second from the left, and then next to her, to her left, our right, is Frank from El Paso. Frank, who is totally blind, by the way, was my attendant once in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
We were on an action, and he would help me get into bed, get me out of bed. Totally blind, but that's all we do. We help each other out on these. And then on the far right is Jennifer, who you mentioned before. She was 10 years old at that time, I think.
9 or 10.
9 or 10, yeah. Yeah, Jennifer had cerebral palsy, and she and her sister Kaylee and her mother were passing through New Mexico. Wade gave me a call and said, "We got some people passing through. Can you put them up?" And I said, "Sure." I had no idea who they were, but opened my apartment to them, and so I got to know Jennifer and her sister and her mom, which was pretty cool. And then this next picture. All right, tell us about this, Tom.
On both pictures, you actually will see Michael Winters. He was, in the early days, he was a show director at Berkeley, and then came to D.C. and actually was the head of the Civil Rights Office of the DOT. But that's also Jennifer, who both of them started out down below, and at this point, Michael said, "Okay, this is it. I can't do it anymore," and so
he made it up 3 steps and stopped. That was it.
No. This is actually
okay.
That's just a little like a ramp,
okay.
or level place, and it goes down, and he's just like, okay, and he gets he sits up like that, and he sees Jennifer over there, crawling up, and he said, "Oh shoot, I can't stop now." They're on their way to the top, and but
You said Jennifer's 10 in this picture,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So.
And so
It
she
was-
climbed out of her wheelchair and she said, "If everybody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it too." Huh?
Yeah, and she probably was shouting all the way. I don't know if you remember her. She had a lung.
Yeah.
She had lungs on her, and
Oh,
she would lead people in chanting a lot.
Oh yeah, she inspired a lot of people. A lot of people started getting out of their chairs and crawling, following Jennifer. And I think we have another picture. So this whole crawling up the steps, Tom, that you took. Here's a good picture of the Capitol in the background. Has become known as the Capitol Crawl. And as I recall, shortly after this picture was taken, or made public anyway, people were calling up their senators and saying, "Why did that little girl have to crawl up those steps? What is going on there?" So Capitol Crawl brought a lot of attention.
It did, and it was kind of funny because I had a friend come back from Paris the day after, and they said they saw the Capitol Crawl on the news in Paris.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so I kind of it was like a shot that was a video shot that was sounded around the world.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, really important, to have pictures like this, because it's not just for for historical reasons and all that. But you know, when I was living in L.A., I used to carry a notebook that had 5x10, 5x7 photos. These photos with me, and I used to be a teacher's aide in special ed, and so I always carried it to different, and I went to different schools, you know, and when the time arose, and you know, at the right time, and that if the teacher was into it, I got to show the kids, you know, pictures, you know. And I remember this one place, there was a kid in a wheelchair. He was the only kid in, it was during the time of them, you know, making other classrooms accessible and trying to integrate, you know, but that also meant that you took kids that were together, that, you know, in wheelchairs, and sometimes you had kids like this kid that was the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And he was probably about, I'd say about 7 or 8 years old, and the teacher didn't know what she was talking. You'll walk when you get old, just, you know, older, you know, you just walk, you know. She didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
But I remember taking this book and putting it down, and you know, the picture you saw with that line, you know, of a lot of people behind that line. He, you know, he looked at it, he looked at me, and he said, I didn't know there were that many people in chairs in the world. In the world. You know, and of course, he'd never seen it, you know. They never saw who would photograph, you know, people in chairs anyhow, you know.
Right.
That was like, oh God, we don't want to, you know, this is not a pity thing. We're not going after money, you know. It was not anything. Then he saw this one. He saw a lot of strong people, you know, and which he had never seen, you know, a person with a disability looking strong.
Well, you never see that on TV, that's for sure.
No, back then especially. My God.
So this is a picture of a guy with, he's got a bicycle.
Oh, well, before that, you're still talking about the crawl?
Yeah.
And so your pictures not only chronicle history, but inspire, bring people to action, cause people to say, hey, what's going on? You've got to make change.
Right, and sometimes it's not even a picture. It's like where you find these pictures, you know. My favorite venue was, I had some pictures in the Weekly Readers, and a lot of young people won't know that one, but it was a newsletter that all kids got going to elementary school, you know. And here was pictures of you know, of people that were, you know, looking strong and that were disabled, you know. I mean, it was the start of, you know, still back then. You had the, you know, Frankenstein complex. You know, anyone with a disability, you know, is a freak,
monster or
you know,
evil.
And so it was good to start turning those things around.
And of course back then you're using the 35 millimeter celluloid film, so you get 24, maybe 36 pictures per roll on a camera. So the film is expensive. Every time you develop it, it's expensive. So you have to be a bit judicious in how you take pictures.
Oh, I know. Yeah, like the handcuffs one. It was one day of a protest, and I only had one roll of film.
Oh.
Only 24 exposures on that one. That's all I could afford, you know.
Wow. You made it count. Well, here's a good one of Mike Arberger
and Bob Kafka.
And Bob Kafka in Revolving Doors, it looks like.
Yes, and they, you know, having their kryptonite locks. They're bicycle kryptonite locks, and we call them our necklaces, you know, for you know, stopping these doors. And they were there for, gosh, 4 to 8 hours. I can't even remember, and
Wow.
and it was so funny. The police tried so many ways of trying to get them, and you can't cut them with a grinder,
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah.
That's what they call.
Oh no, that's
cooking.
the only way you can. You
Oh,
can't. You
oh,
can't
okay.
bolt cut them, but you
Ah,
can
okay.
use a grinder. But who's going to use a grinder, especially
Right next
when
to somebody's
with
face, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
media's looking.
Right, yeah.
And so what was really funny, they had a utility guy from this is a U.S. Federal building in Atlanta, the Russell Building, and this the utility person came by, and he had a pocket protective with little screwdrivers and stuff like that. I said, do you want these chains off? And the police said, we tried, and he was walking away, and the policeman, kind of, well, if you can. He takes his little screwdriver, goes over, and these doors have screws with that where they're tied up.
And the handle?
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
the handle.
Oh.
So he just went like this. It's like here.
So you just took the handle off of the
48
door.
hours. They had this is a revolving door, and they blocked it completely all that time.
And what building was this? You remember, Tom?
This is the Russell the federal building in Atlanta, the Russell building.
Oh, okay.
which was kind of a really interesting. I don't know if it was this. I think it was the next protest at that building, and it started to rain. Were taking all the people out of the building and into the rain, and somehow the word got back to Washington D.C. We had a few people in the government. One of the people that was very involved in, especially with us, was Evan Kemp Jr., who was the ELC commissioner at that time, and he had the ear of the senior counsel of Bush, and plus had dinners with the president, and so he called them and said, we've got people down here. The federal building security is taking people out into the rain, and so he told them to not let that happen, and so Atlanta got the word that the president wants the people back in the building.
Yeah.
So it was kind of one of the first times that a president actually
Got involved?
It got involved in one of the demonstrations.
Now here's a picture using those famous bolt cutters you mentioned. When I guess we got to the point where we didn't want to be moved, we started using chains and they'd pull out the bolt cutters, so we pulled out bigger chains. And in fact, I remember when we were in the rotunda months before the ADA, Michael Winters was sitting right in front of me, and he reaches around the back of his chair, and he pulls out this big chain. I thought it was like an anchor chain, and it was. Then I knew it was time to get serious. I knew they weren't going to get through that, but yeah, it makes a great picture.
Yeah. It was with it was really funny when Michael was interviewed for a federal job, there at the DOT. He called me up and said, when was I arrested? I got put all this down with the FBI. He's asked me all these questions, And it was what's kind of neat is that, it became a badge of, it was
honor,
not
yeah.
something that you were, if you did do that, you could not, get a job or anything, but it actually helped, especially in the civil rights places under different administrations, and same way with Karen Tamley from the mayor's office, person up in Chicago. You know, I mean, a lot of these people were arrested literally hundreds of times.
Yeah, very serious. But chains aren't the only thing that are impressive.
Talk about getting serious.
Yeah,
This
Yeah.
picture, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
we were. We got the city buses accessible, but Greyhound continued to be inaccessible, and people would, during protests, would throw themselves under the buses to keep the Greyhound buses from moving. And Danny Sines from Austin did that. We were in Dallas, and I saw him do that, and I couldn't believe it. Right under the bus. That's shows your commitment.
Right, right.
Right
And these,
there.
these things are, when they don't turn off. These are big diesel engines, so
Oh.
that they're kept
Yeah.
on going. And it was like, I still have someone say, "Yeah, I miss that diesel smell." When we used to do the back of the bus. And like you said before, Gene, you know, you block one, you know, and you're blocking 10. Well, with
Yeah.
Greyhound, it's even worse than that, because they have to stop all the way across the U.S.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So when you
Yeah.
shut down Austin, shut down St. Louis, you know, some of those routes, you know, are long routes.
Yep, they have quite an impact. But also we had, let's take a look at, here's our friend Justin Dart, who's a leader in the disability community. And, I remember him traveling around the states and trying to get input on what people thought should be in disability rights laws. And so he was recognized everywhere.
Yeah, a lot because of his hat.
That hat,
well,
yeah, you can't miss that hat.
Yeah, I've heard different presidents say that, you know, every once in a while, if they happen to say something about disability, they'd look up and look for that hat. His dad was on the kitchen cabinet of Reagan's, and so that's how he got into politics. And kind of, he leaned more towards the Democrats, and Evan was a Democrat that finally decided, well, Bush was probably the president that was going to do something with the ADA, and he was right. And so he became a Republican, you know, during
okay.
this. A lot of people switched
Yeah.
their allegiances for different reasons. And that picture was also Justin's favorite picture, because it was not just him, you know, it was all the people around. He really liked that. Yeah.
And here's another picture of Justin Dart on the far right, and that guy in the center, that looks like President Bush signing the ADA.
Yeah, he signed the ADA.
He said he would sign it before the ink is even dry on the bill. So
Yeah, and that's Evan Kemp Jr. on his left, and you have Reverend Wilkie up here, and he's, you know, he's a double amputee in the arms, you know, but he, like a lot of the people back then, had a long sleeve jacket on, you know, and it was kind of funny, because right after he goes signing, you know, the president has all these pins that he's signing,
Souvenir pins,
and stuff
yeah.
like that, and he had a vice president called Quayle, Don Quayle?
Dan Quayle.
Dan
Quayle.
Quayle, right. And Dan takes the pin out of the president's
Bush,
hand,
yeah.
because Reverend Rilke was invited by the president. That was his personal, you know, thing that he wanted to do, and so Dan, you know, okay, I'm going to, you know, do him right, you know, and so he gets this pin, and he says, he tries to have
Reverend Wilkie take it?
take it, you know.
Hand it to him.
And Reverend Wilkie is kind of shaking his head, you know, and then, you know, Reverend Wilkie is kind of like moving out of the way, so he's, you know, and finally he realized that Dan Quayle isn't going to let him not take it, you know. So he sits down, takes off his shoe, grabs it by his foot, you know. And Quayle is just like, he'd stopped already. He's like a deer in the headlights, you know.
Wow.
One of those little things that you get to see when you're only 3 feet away.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, the advantages of being a photographer. Well, Tom, thanks so much for sharing your photos with us and for chronicling the disability rights movement. It's been quite an education for us, not only for Dave and I, but for the whole audience we have here in Austin, and for our website, the GeneandDaveShow.com, seen all over the world. So thanks, we appreciate it.
But speaking of other, just in addition to all the photos that you have, you also own another treasure. Is that right? With related to the ADA.
The bus?
A bus?
Oh, okay.
Oh, the ADA bus. Yeah, good one, Dave. Yes. The ADA bus. I'm very familiar, yeah.
Yes. And I'm, right now it's parked outside of Austin, getting ready to get out there again. And I have a couple of exhibits, one that was just shown at the Kennedy Center in D.C., and some of and the others, some of them are from the Smithsonian exhibit. But there's also a lot of photos I get to take out and show at different places. And I was involved with Rev Up just a little while ago, and still am, because I think it's really important, like I said, for local and state politicians to see our history. And
Sure.
I'm taking this around. I think it's really important for people that come down like you all, and with the legislators, and say, this is our history. This is why we're doing, why we're here. This is how we got here. This is, and we got to keep on. We have to do it over and over again.
Sure.
Yeah.
We just can't just. We're not, in the African American history, they have family, familia, same with the Latino civil rights movement. They have something to pass down. We don't have that kind of passing down. We have to do it with our friends, do it with organizations, and so it's very, very, very important for all of us to just go, even beyond and make sure our history is given, and kept.
So if there's an organization or somebody that wants to get a hold of you or wants to see more of your pictures, more of your work, how do they do that, Tom?
Gosh. Usually I just say Google the Freedom Bus, ADA Freedom Bus.
Okay.
But I should have figured that one out before I came here.
We'll see if we can help you with that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll add that.
Thank you.
We'll add that URL on in post-production.
Yeah, as I usually say in these conversations, that's a good question.
It's hard to get a hold of Tom. He's kind of a nomad. He just goes wherever that bus takes him, is what he was telling me earlier.
And I get to, in doing that, you get to go places where you're needed. There was a big vote at the, in Michigan on low wages and slave labor of some of our institutions still, and I got to go right there and make a difference, and got in the press, having having a bus, you know, is like a big press, you know, placard,
yeah,
you
Sure,
know,
yeah,
that you
yeah,
can
very
use, you know, and so, you know, I got some good press from the Detroit Free Press, just like, you know, bringing it up there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So you started with a T-shirt and you ended up with a bus,
Yeah.
and
Way to go.
you figured out how to get into places.
That's Tom
Good way to
Olin,
put it.
folks, the most famous photographer, documentarian of the disability rights movement.
Amazing stories. Thanks so much for being here, Tom. Really
Oh,
appreciate
my
it.
pleasure. Always.